Hello everyone and welcome to the first video tutorial for the Advanced Spawn Manager. So in this we're just going to cover some basic spawning and placement, and I'll give you play here to show you an example of what we're going to achieve by the end of it. And we're just going to spawn 3 enemies, and they're just going to spawn at these 3 different spawn locations you can see here. Not that one in the background, just these 3. Okay, so I'm going to jump into it, and I'm going to start by finding the examples folder, which should be in your download, and then prefabs, examples again, and simple structure. I'm going to drag that into the scene here, and I'm going to explain quickly what this is. It's got a spawn manager, a wave group, and a wave. Okay, I'll explain in another video more about this spawn manager, but for now and for this example, all it needs is to know what enemies it's going to be spawning. And for this, I've downloaded this asset for Knight and Chainmail. It doesn't come included in this pack, neither does the environment, but you can download this for free, and I'll provide the links, and also provide the links for the terrain here. Anyway, and I've made some example enemies we're going to put in here. So back to the spawn manager, I'm going to start dragging them in. So default enemy, blue enemy, bronze enemy, and red. And the other thing I'm going to do, which is not essential, is drag in a parent. So what this does is every time you spawn an enemy, it'll become a child of this. Just keeps the scene a lot neater. Okay, we can run this now, but the enemies don't know where to spawn. So I'm just going to show you how to do this, because in the free version you won't have the placement manager. You won't have to do this step though, but for your enemy what you need to do is you need to go to initialize and just uncomment this line here, which tells the enemy to spawn where the placement manager tells it. So I'm just going to comment that out so we can see it running without it. Give it a run. If you look here, you'll see that 8 enemies are spawning. And they don't know where to spawn, so I'm going to pause it and have a look where they are. So we're just dropping in the middle of space here because they just don't know what to do. Okay, so let's change that. Let's put a placement manager so they know actually where to spawn. So first of all, let's go back to our view in the scene, and let's go back and uncomment this line again. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to add a placement manager. So first of all, I'm just going to add an empty game object. I'm going to call it placement manager. And I'm going to go ahead and add the placement manager script. Now it needs a spawn manager so it knows how to link the positions with the correct waves and wave groups. So I'm just going to drag that in here now. As you can see, it's linked to the intro group. It knows it's going to run for 2 seconds, and it's only got 1 wave. Right now it's no spawn area, so let's change that. Let's add 3, just to show you 3 different types of areas that we have. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to spawn sequentially per object. I'll go into detail more about what these do in another video. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to go ahead and add these 3 spawn areas. So area 1, and for it I'm going to go ahead and add a spawn area script. And so for the first type, I'm not going to assign a collider, and as you can see in the inspector we just see this little ball, and what that means is it's just going to spawn at the transform. It's just going to spawn exactly where it's positioned. So let me just move this around, let's put it over here. And we have our first spawn area, so let's drag it into the placement manager. Okay, so let's make 2 more. So this is a second type of spawn area we can have, which is a box collider. I'm going to drag that in, and I'm going to turn it off. You don't need to turn the collider off. The spawn area will automatically do this when it starts. I just like doing it. Okay, so let's move it around here. Is that floating a little bit too much? I think it is. Let's try to look at one. Yeah, it's floating miles in the air. Let's fix that. Let's pull that down a good bit. There we go. Okay, that's better. So it's back to our area 2 now. I'm going to move it over here, stretch it out a bit more. One thing I like to do, which I think is important but it depends on your game, is instead of making these colliders tall, I'm going to make it flat. This is pretty important because whatever collider you provide here, it will spawn in this area. So if you have a tall collider like this, let's make it a bit bigger to exaggerate this, and if you spawn enemies anywhere in this area, they can either spawn on the floor or floating in midair, and you'll see them falling. So I don't think that's good for what we want here, so let's make it flat. And let's move closer to the ground. There we go. And since we've made it, let's drag it in. We'll do our third type of spawn area, which is going to be a sphere. So area 3, sphere collider, drag that in as well. And let's move this over again, it's also floating around. There we go, and let's move this further up and make it a bit bigger. Okay, I'll go into this in more detail, but with a sphere in another video. But for a sphere, there's different ways of spawning, and let's go ahead and change this to within flat sphere, so it'll spawn inside there. Again, I'll explain this properly in another video. And we'll drag this in here. And now we'll see if our enemies will spawn in these groups, so let's play that and have a look. Okay, and there you are spawning in here. I'm going to show you one other thing very quickly. Let's go back to our placement manager, spawning sequentially there. And so I'll explain what this is just now. I'll show you what's happening. So to do that first, I'll make it so we're spawning our wave to run for a second, and we'll spawn an enemy every third of a second, so we'll spawn 3 enemies, 1 for each zone. But to make this clearer, I'm going to add a padding time, so I'll show you why. So when I click play, you just see them spawn instantly, so it's a bit difficult to see where they spawned in time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a padding here of, actually it's going to make it 3 seconds. So what this means is it'll wait 3 seconds before spawning any of these instructions. This is pretty useful for, say you've had a busy wave of lots of enemies and you don't want to spawn the next wave instantly because you need to give the player a chance to kill all the enemies he just spawned. So that's what this padding function is used for here. So if we click play now, we've now got 3 seconds to wait before the enemies will spawn. And now we can nicely see that we spawned in area 1, 2, then 3, because 1 was that one, and then 2, and then 3. Okay, so that's the first video tutorial. The next one will be on the placement manager.